Number 632 will be the invitation song tonight after our study. A blessing it is to be here. The song that we just sang, Our God, He is alive, especially the verse where it talks about the germ He holds within His hand. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. The most reasonable explanation for the existence of life on this earth. What is the most reasonable explanation for the source, the cause, and the complexities of the life that we see, that we all are sharing in? So, there are copies of my charts over on the table. I can print out more if you would like, because I had to cut a bunch of charts out of my material. I've got a whole lot more material than what I'm going to be able to present tonight. So those charts are available on the table. I also want to say something just briefly about Baldwin and Benta and their two children, Cyrus and Bridget. I met Baldwin, I don't even remember what year it was. It was late 90s in Belize. And we were both teaching and preaching there in Corozal Town, Belize. And we became friends. And we eventually made a return trip back to Belize together. And he's originally from Belize. He's living in Anaheim, California. But his family still owns property in Belize. And so we went back and had our own vehicle and everything. And it was really a great time that we spent preaching and teaching God's word together. And we became such friends that I was honored for them to invite me to come and perform their wedding, which we made a trip out to Anaheim and drove up to Portersville, California, and performed the wedding. And now they've got two kids. And so we've known each other for years. And Baldwin is a school teacher. And so every summer he makes little trips. And he's been here a few times already, and some of you remember him from when he was visiting with us at 65th Street. But it's just a pleasure to have him come and stay a few days with us. They're going to be leaving back, heading towards California on Tuesday morning. So great to know them, and I've been so appreciative of the work that they have done, and just a great influence. So, okay, let's get going here this morning. We're going to start in Psalm 139, verse 13. For you formed my inward parts, you covered me with my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. Brethren, I want to say to you something. That term marvelous, I don't think we can comprehend. We can try to explain it with terms, the greatness of God's work and what he has done. But really, the language is not capable of expressing the greatness of God and the wisdom of God, the glory of God. Marvelous are your works. And that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. Now, how is that possible? Because of that which was to become David, that in and of itself was marvelous. When you think about life, the beginnings of life, the very basic makeup of what makes something living is an extremely complex and amazing thing. So that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. A couple of weeks ago, we mentioned Richard Dawkins, and actually I showed this quote, but I want to repeat it. Natural selection, the blind conscious automatic process which Darwin discovered and which we now what? Know. We pointed out last week, no he doesn't, is the explanation for the existence and apparently purposeful form of all life. Mr. Dawkins, where did life come from? He says we know, but he really doesn't know.
Well, then how did it get created?
This is a quote from
Well,
Expelled.
by a very slow
Intelligence
process.
Allowed.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
What was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right. How did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
We don't
So
know.
you have no idea how it started,
No, nor has anybody.
nor has anyone else.
So he doesn't know. Even though he said he did, he doesn't know, which we now know. No, we don't. And he goes on and he talks about how, well, Benstein asked him, well, is it possible that it is intelligently designed? In which he responds, well, it's possible that some far away galaxy or in this universe somewhere, there is a being or a race of people far more intelligent than we are, technologically advanced, so technologically advanced that they made life and sowed it on this planet. The idea is really called transpermia, which aliens brought it here, basically is what he's saying. Why does he say that? Because he knows that the traditional view that life started over 3.9 billion years ago is not possible. He knows that. And so should everybody else. Of course, Benstein went on and asked, well, where did that come from? Well, we don't know. We don't know is the continued answer. So Benstein says, well, he does accept the possibility of intelligent design, just some form of intelligent design, but not God. God is the only logical explanation. We talked last time about the law of cause and effect, which states that every material effect must have an adequate cause that existed before the effect. When you look at a robot, and we are becoming more and more advanced in what we're able to do. Some of you've got those little robots that go around your floor, and sweep up dirt off your floor, and it does it automatically. Did you ever look at that thing and say, wow, what a wonderful thing evolved over millions of years in my living room? No! You know that somebody made that. You think of some of the advanced technology that we have, we're able to make robots. Nobody, Richard Dawkins included, nobody would say, wow, what a wonderful thing has evolved over so many millions of years. We know that somebody with a greater intelligence than that which was made it. We know that. That's knowledge, by the way. You can say that's science. Atheist claims that science has proven their position of naturalistic evolution, but they haven't. The question of how and when life began cannot be scientifically proven. You can't replicate it. You can't observe it. You can try to make the distinction between historical science and observational science. But even historical science has to have a logical conclusion. An adequate explanation for the obvious complexities in design of living things cannot be answered by science. And I say obvious complexities. We have learned a lot over the last 70 years about life. This is stated in 1977 by Robert Jastrow. He's an evolutionary astronomer. And he says, at present, science has no satisfactory answer to the question of the origin of life on the earth. Perhaps the appearance of life on the earth is a miracle. Scientists are reluctant to accept that view, but their choices are limited. Either life was created on the earth by the will of a being outside the grasp of scientific understanding, or it evolved on our planet spontaneously through chemical reactions occurring in non-living matter lying on the surface of the planet. The first theory places the question of the origin of life beyond the reach of scientific inquiry. It is a statement of faith in the power of a supreme being not subject to the laws of science. The second theory is also an act of faith. He's right. The act of faith consists in assuming that the scientific view of the origin of life is correct without having concrete evidence to support that belief. Where is the evidence to support that belief? And I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. Atheism is a belief system. You have to believe it. The question is, what does the evidence most reasonably explain? When it comes to life, I think that it is obvious that the evidence conclusively should bring us to the position and the understanding that there is a creation, a being with far greater intelligence than we can grasp. That's God. We have been told for many years, and this is still in the textbooks, by the way, this is still what our children are being taught. This is what you see on the National Geographic Channel or the History Channel if you turn on some of these scientific shows, or the Sci-Fi Channel, and they start talking about the origins of life. By the way, there was a fella who I had a quote from, it's not in the slides, from 1955, where he said that, 2 billion years ago, well, they come to decide and understand that 2 billion years wasn't nearly enough time. So they had to extend it to 3.9 billion years. So we have enough time, by the way, 3.9 billion years regarding the period of life that they think has been in existence on the earth, but 4.5 billion years all the way back to the point of the beginning of time for the earth itself. But you have enough time plus enough chance or enough opportunities, and voila, you have life. Time plus chance, they say, equals life. The odds, the chance. Do you know what the odds are? Most scientists who are honest enough to admit it realize that the odds are impossible. This is from PBS Nova film, The Miracle of Life. 4.5 billion years ago, the young planet Earth was almost completely engulfed by the shallow primordial seas. Powerful winds gathered random molecules from the atmosphere. Some were deposited in the seas. Tides and currents swept the molecules together, and somewhere in this ancient ocean, the miracle of life began. What an amazing accident. This has been believed in the scientific community for years, and it is attempted to be proven. The Miller-Urey experiment, Harold Urey and Stanley Miller, back in 1953, did this experiment, and I remember Brother Buddy Payne teaching a lesson on this. He said that this almost cost him his faith when this first happened. It was being published as, "We have found the source of life." And I remember Brother Buddy Payne talking about that. So they're trying to show and provide evidence that life could be the result of natural processes. So they made the atmosphere, put some methane in a test tube, and some ammonia, and some hydrogen, and some water, and they connected this loop to it and put some sparks in it, simulating lightning. And they let this run. After a day of continuous operation, they found hydrocarbons on the surface of the water. And after about a week, there was a dark scum formed in the bottom of the trap. And so they cleaned that out, and they had several different types of amino acid, including glycine and alanine, which are amino acids that are included in life forms. Other forms or other elements, sugars and tars and various other organic materials were found. Paul Davies said making the building blocks of life is easy. And it's really not that easy, because they've been doing this and trying to reproduce it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again since 1953. and they can only get so far with it. It doesn't do exactly what they think or what they want it to do. But he makes the point that amino acids have been found in meteorites and even in outer space, and that's true. But just as bricks alone don't make a house, so it takes more than a random collection of amino acids to make life. Like house bricks, the building blocks of life have to be assembled in a very specific and exceedingly elaborate way before they have the desired function. We talked about this last time too, about the creation of the universe. And we used the illustration of loaves being blown up into a billion pieces. Okay, you've got the Big Bang and the loaves and all the material in it, or Home Depot is what I use, goes flying into the air, and it all comes back down, and voila, you've got a house, a perfectly functioning house. Now, even if it's a little tiny house. Okay, imagine you go up to the doorknob, everything works right. You walk in, you flip the light switch on, you go to the sink, turn the water on, everything works. What are the odds of that happening? Just because you may find materials, that doesn't mean that voila, it accidentally comes together and is a functioning living being. That's not possible. I think we all know that's not possible. You take all of the parts of a robot, put them in a box, all the parts necessary, and dump them out on the floor. And you just dump them, keep dumping them out. How many times are you going to have to dump it out on the floor before it's all together and it starts working? Doesn't work. We know that. It requires a designer. Anything that explicitly and clearly manifests design implies a designer. Let's talk a little bit about DNA. And this is not a study, and I'm not trying to tell you everything about DNA because I can't do that. Even if I had the time, I don't know enough about it. I know enough to talk about it a little bit. I'm not a molecular biologist, but I have read things and I have studied things, and I know a little bit about it. I know that DNA is a nucleic acid, and I know that it contains the genetic code or genetic instructions specifying the biological development of all cellular forms of life. I know that in DNA, the code that is found there determines the kind of life that is going to be made or going to come about. Just like with David when he talked about how he was skillfully and wonderfully made in his mother's womb. DNA has over 3 billion base pairs, 4 chemicals in a chain, and you can see a picture of what it sort of looks like, not exactly, but made up of these 4 chemicals: adenine, cytosine, thymine, guanine. Adenine and thymine always go together. Guanine and glycine always go together. But their arrangement in this structure is a code. It gives a message. It's information. And this information determines the kind of cell that it is. Where did this information, this code, come from? Richard Dawkins talked about sometimes we may find a signature in the cell. I've got the book right here, Signature in the Cell by Stephen C. Meyer. He argues that information does not come from inanimate matter. Information is produced by a mind. It requires intelligence. Things that communicate has some kind or some level of intelligence. You know, if you were to talk to some random scientist out there and they discovered something from outer space like Morse code. So wait a minute, that's a signal from outer space. What does that prove in their mind? Intelligent life. Wouldn't they argue that? that proves intelligent life is out there sending us this code, even if it's a very simplistic language. Do you understand the information that is found in the DNA in just one of your cells? How much is contained in just that little bit of DNA? By the way, if you were to take a piece of DNA out of one cell, this is amazing. 6 feet long. But you coil that up and you pack it into one little cell, which is much, much, much smaller than a grain of sand. How do you do that? God did it. Stephen Meyer says, whatever information is, whether thought or an elaborate arrangement of matter, one thing seems clear. What humans recognize as information certainly originates from thought, from conscious or intelligent activity. Our experience of the world shows that what we recognize as information invariably reflects the prior activity of conscious and intelligent persons. Rocks do not communicate with each other. People do. Monkeys can communicate with each other. Other life forms can communicate with each other, but they can only communicate up to the level of their intelligence. But information must come from a conscious, intelligent being. My friend, your cells are packed with information. Derricott said the information in DNA is sufficient for directing and controlling all the processes which transpire within a cell, including diagnosing, repairing, and replicating the cell. Think of an architectural blueprint having the capacity of actually building the structure depicted on the blueprint, of maintaining that structure in good repair, and even replicating it. My friend, DNA contains all of the information necessary to make you who you are. In contemporary organisms, DNA and RNA are proteins which are mutually interdependent. One doesn't work without the other. Now, if naturalistic evolution were true, how? You can't have one without the other. In order for them to function, you have to have them both functioning at the same time. That's not going to happen accidentally. DNA stores the genetic information and copies it to RNA, and RNA then produces the proteins, the synthesis of proteins that does the work in your cells. Whatever work needs to be done, it is instructed to do so by the DNA, and the RNA is producing the work. Sir Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Peace Prize as being one of the, him and Dr. Watson are the discoverers of the DNA and how it works to an extent. This is back 1953, I believe, as well. If a particular amino acid sequence was selected by chance, how rare an event would this be? The great majority of sequences can never have been synthesized at all at any time. An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. Now, this was going all the way back to 1953. Quoted earlier from a fellow from 1977, he recognized the same thing. Have things gotten any better for the naturalistic scientists since then? No. In fact, things have gotten worse because now we know more. And the more that we know, the more we realize, wow, this could not have accidentally happened. That's why men like even Richard Dawkins comes up, well, maybe some intelligent designer way out in the universe somewhere planted life here. Somebody had to make it. Couldn't have accidentally happened. They know that. So the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have to have had to have been satisfied to get it going. Dr. Sir Fred Hoyle, who is a naturalist, an atheist, but he does recognize a serious problem, and he is also, last I understood, he had adopted the transpermia concept as well, that life was planted here from some superior being or intellect. They're thinking aliens. Of course, I know it's God. But he said the likelihood of the spontaneous formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 noughts after it. It is big enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. He illustrated it this way. He said the current scenario of the origin of life is about as likely as the assemblage of a 747 by a tornado whirling through a junkyard. What are the odds of that happening? Is that possible? Well, people who know science recognize that life could not have happened accidentally. He also illustrated it this way. The life cannot have had a random beginning. Troops of monkeys thundering away on random typewriters could not produce the works of Shakespeare for the practical reason that the whole universe is not large enough to contain the necessary hordes of monkeys or the necessary typewriters, and certainly not the waste paper baskets required for the depositions of the wrong attempts. The same is true for living materials. What does that say? Life requires intelligence, an intelligent designer who had to make it, who put it together. It could not have accidentally happened. Richard Dawkins again, the cell's nucleus contains a digitally coded database larger in information content than all 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica put together, and this figure is for each cell, not all the cells of a body put together. Let me extrapolate that for you. I heard it illustrated this way just this past week by a biologist on, I think it was one of the origins.com programs. He is a biologist. He has all the degrees behind his name. He said that you can take the information in your body, not just one cell, but in your body, and you could put it in a book like this. Okay? But wait a minute, that you can't put all of the information in one book. No, you'd have to have this book plus enough books to reach from this floor to the moon. Not just one stack, but 500 stacks of books like this from the earth to the moon. That's how much information is contained in your body. Accident? Chance? Time plus chance, right? Some things are impossible, regardless of how much time or chance you have. When you think of the simplest cell, even the simplest forms of life, they are highly sophisticated forms of biological machinery. In this cell, you have a power plant, you have a protein modification plant, production plant, a dump. You even have a waste plant. You have everything that a city would have in one cell. And it does all its work together. In fact, it's able to reproduce itself. The copies of that, that's where the DNA and the RNA come in. They reproduce, and they reproduce the cell. It is amazing. A cell could not really be alive or survive unless all functions become operable at once. How did a simple single cell organism simply evolve? Accidentally. By particles bouncing together and being struck by lightning enough times. Can't happen. Michael Behe, also professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University, Darwin's black box, says an irreducible complex system is one that requires several closely matched parts in order to function, and where removal of one of the components effectively causes the system to cease functioning. What does that mean? Okay, let's take a simple mousetrap. He uses this illustration. Okay, it's a very simple contraption. You've got a piece of wood, you've got a couple of pieces of metal, you've got a spring, and you assemble all this. Now you have to design this stuff and make it, but you have to put it together. I mean, it just doesn't grow on trees, right? It doesn't accidentally happen. Even this simple of a thing has to be put together, has to be assembled by someone with some intelligence. But look, what if you just took one part off of that? It wouldn't function anymore. It wouldn't work. If you take one amino acid out of the system, everything breaks down. It doesn't work. Everything has to be perfectly in line. Everything has to be exactly right, or something's messed up. You take a line of proteins that is produced by the DNA, instructing the RNA to produce these proteins, and these proteins are produced, and they're formed in a line. And each protein has, let's say, a different color. They're different proteins. They're made up of different things, different amino acids. And so you put this string together. I saw an illustration where a guy was, asked to put a blindfold on, and he had 5 building blocks. They were different colors. And then he was given a basket. And in this basket, you had the other parts of that building block, the matching colors, and you had to reach in there blindly and match those up. He couldn't do it. Of course not. Well, what are the odds? Of course, you take a string of proteins, some 300 proteins long, or some up to 30,000, but they all have to be in exactly the right order. You know what happens if you get one of those just out of order? Sickle cell anemia. You heard of that? That's what happens. That's the problem. Cancers, that's what happens. That's just in the proteins. But the DNA, that's impossible without the DNA and RNA working together. None of it is possible to even exist, much less function properly. Michael B. He goes on and says, in short, highly sophisticated molecular machines control every cellular process, transport information, flip switches on and off, talking about in a cell, conduct electrical currents, manufacture molecules, move around. Thus, the details of life are finely calibrated, and the machinery of life enormously complex. Scientists know this. And you think about all the different parts of your body, ingestion, digestion, just one genetic flaw can cause you to have serious digestion issues. I've got a hiatal hernia that's caused a lot of problems. Apparently that's genetic. Respiration, circulation, reproduction, growth, sight, the eye. Brother Matthews was talking about the eye and the complexities of the eye. I know a little bit about that too. Apparently I've got some genetic flaw with my eyes that is causing my retina to detach or trying to separate. And so I've had some surgeries and procedures to try to stop that before it gets worse. But it's a very complex thing. Scientists know that. And if one part of the eye breaks down, it all breaks down. Back to Urey and Miller about their test, if I can synthesize life here, then I will prove that no intelligence was required to produce life in the beginning. We've got intelligence. We just don't have nearly as much intelligence as God. So there's no way we're going to accomplish it. It is impossible. I was watching also this past week a debate between Bill Nye the Science Guy and Ken Ham. And after the debate was over with, there was a question and answer period. And somebody asked Bill Nye a question about the origin of life, and Bill Nye tried to answer it. And he said, well, he wound up just saying, well, we really don't know. I love Ken Ham's response. He's with Answers in Genesis. And by the way, they've got a bunch of great information on this particular subject, but I love his response. He said, Mr. Nye, there's a book out there, and it tells you where life came from. He was asked about Noah and the flood, and Mr. Nye again said, well, there's some things we don't understand about how these layers and everything happen, and we don't understand. Ken Ham said, there's a book out there. And there is. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 20, then God said, let the waters abound with the abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created earth, great sea creatures, and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Psalm 139 and verse 13, for you formed my inward parts, you covered me with my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. And that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. My friend, there are people who are willfully ignorant. One of the charts I cut out, and I don't want to go back. I just want to mention something that's stated in that chart. People who are dedicated and committed to proving naturalism, materialism, they're not going to accept the truth, and they are exactly what the Apostle Paul says here regarding those who are without excuse. They see the evidence. It is abundant. It is clear. It is obvious. But they say, that's not what we want. We've got to prove it from a purely naturalistic perspective. Why? Because they don't want God. Although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God. See, they don't glorify him as God. They don't recognize him. And they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. That's what the God of heaven says about those who reject the clear evidence that he's given. And so God commands all men everywhere to repent. At one time, God overlooked ignorance, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given of this to all by raising him from the dead. One of these days, we're going to stand before the God of heaven, and we're going to give an account. And what we better do is recognize God now. Is it reasonable to believe in God? Absolutely. And the most reasonable explanation for the source, the cause, and the complexities of life that we see on this earth is obviously God. He is the most reasonable answer to the question. Not only is it reasonable to believe in God, my friend, it is unreasonable. If you're here tonight, you need to turn to this God, the God who created you and who placed you in this world, and the one before whom you are accountable for how you live your life. You need to come to him. Let us help you. The scriptures very clearly say that God wants you to come to him. He's not far from any of us. Acts 17 states. You can come to him tonight. You can turn away from your sin and you can trust in him and you can obey him. You can be baptized into Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins and you can be saved and have the hope of everlasting life. There are so many other things that we could talk about in that regard. But if you're here tonight and we can help you, won't you come while we stand? While we stand.
Hear the blessed Savior, calling in oppressed.